Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and properly seconded to approve the March 21st meeting minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Next, we have the bond criteria discussion, and I will turn it over to Erilyn Ogden.
She got the sad face.
Oh, no.
Okay, but in the packet, unless you want to post.
Good picture. Yeah. it is a good one.
Oh, that is nice. I always love the happy easement closing photos. Yay. They were so excited.
Yes.
That was a fun one. Fun. The bond ranking system, is that what you're wanting to see?
That's the, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll probably just take a look at that. Hopefully we can pull it up here. They'll just look at their pockets.
Yeah.
I think as long as I can see this. Okay, cool. So just an update. When we presented the ranking, the evaluation and ranking criteria for the bond land conservation component at the commissioners meeting a month ago or so. And so we got some comments, and they basically requested for us to make a few changes and then bring it back to another meeting. So some of the comments that we received was that we wanted to make sure that the Ag Advisory, and it was all specifically focused on the Ag Advisory Board bond ranking. So they wanted to make sure that we encourage the leveraging funding from other sources. Also wanting to make sure that we are capturing in some way that we're encouraging high landowner donation percentages, and really wanted us to remove the factoring in any of the development pressure into our ranking system. So I think the goal around that was to make sure that we are not competing with the affordable housing component or bond, and also to make sure that we're in alignment with the new county comp plan. So,
And that was specifically, say that word, because we had the sewer, proximity to sewer and water. And obviously, if they're on public sewer and water, that's a great opportunity for development of affordable housing.
sure. Yeah.
So that was and that was the specific language.
It's
Yeah.
specific language that
Yeah.
was, and of me, and I could speak on that a bit, but really the reason that component has been in our Ag Advisory Board ranking system since, I believe, the beginning of its creation, is because our grant programs that we apply for, they prioritize that in their rankings. So when OVNI updated the ranking last summer, we actually reduced the points pretty significantly of what it used to prioritize in that development pressure section. But we wanted to keep it in there so that, when we are ranking projects, we're able to see, hey, this is gonna rank well with them. If our ranking system, reflects similar components to a bond ranking, I meant grant ranking system. And we're able to put the best projects forward because we know they'll rank well with our grants. So that was kind of why it was in there to begin with. But we also understand that specifically with it being the bond ranking system, we want to make sure that we're not competing with other, priorities.
And I think part of the confusion at the commissioner meeting was we weren't looking at the ranking criteria as a whole. So the stuff that happened before we got to the bond wasn't discussed. And so that piece that is in looking at it for the grant funds was confusing. So I don't think there is, this is my personal opinion, I don't think we are at odds with what the board wants to see with the ranking criteria. I think it was just some confusion in how the information was presented, because we aren't looking to put conservation easements
We don't want to compete with
in
the
urban space. So I think it was just
Yeah.
a little,
That being said, we have
Yeah.
made changes,
yeah.
you know. Do you have anything to add on the development pressure?
Yeah, I would just say we based our current ranking off the USDA ranking framework. And in that, it's like 3% for soils, 35 for clustering, and then 35% for clustering, and then 20 for farmland potential, and 10% for development potential. It's a very small, could be 10 points out of 100. So we did it because it followed the USDA framework and because it was part of our old rankings. Don't want to take it out completely at the time. So yeah, that's the only reason we had it in, but so we can keep it in for our purposes, but for the bond.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's just the piece. So those are basically the comments that we received at the commissioners meeting. And that we we went back to the table, started making some changes in our system. I mean, in the ranking. And then the other question we want to talk about today is just on our flow chart that we presented, there is basically once a project is eligible for requesting bond funding, you come to a question of this project can apply for up to 50% of easement purchase. And we just want a little bit of clarification and see like how you guys are feeling about the up to 50%. How to explain that. So,
But I also think we want to touch on number 2 on there just for a moment
Oh, great.
too. Because as you all know, we're looking for the highest quality farmland projects for this board to move forward. And those projects may not be able to receive a full donation. And so that becomes an equity piece of just because you can donate, does that prioritize you? And truly, it's not really touching the bond fund if you can donate, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of sets it out, but that was part, that there was a conversation there about prioritizing and then leveraging. And so I think for this board, there's an opportunity to explain that leveraged fund piece, because we will continue to bring in. The old number was 10-1. For every county dollar spent, we bring in $10. And I think we're still around there somewhere, maybe we can. So that when we do donation, we're not going after bond funds anyhow.
right.
So I think there was a little confusion.
Yeah, we just want to
on
make
that a
sure
bit.
that we are, you know, we are encouraging high landowner donation values, but a lot of our working farms can't afford to donate more than 50% of their easement value. So we want to be careful there. You know, some landowners can afford to do 100% donation. And sometimes those are great projects and sometimes they're mediocre projects. But, you know, it just kind of depends.
I can speak some since I was sitting there doing this. And it was specifically the chair who brought this up. And so this is around not just number 2, like really for both of them. Right. And he just felt that it was called out better on the Land Conservation Board because it specifically, I think, had criteria, it had leveraging, and you noticed that. Why don't you have that on the ag advisory? So that was the question. I just like, and somehow valuing that leveraging. I reminded him after the meeting about specifically farms and all that, and he's like, so noted,
Okay.
right? So noted. You just, you know, some things you just have other conversations and don't continue on in a meeting. But and then, but the key thing to your point that gave him heartburn was the water. Because that's the exact language that we're using on the affordable house side. Right? So they're saying wherever we have that, we can use housing, the exact same language he said basically. So that was the piece that gave him heartburn there. Like, is a way, can we just change that language, do it in some other way to where we're not using that same language, you know, and what's going to be seen as too, can be seen as too complicated.
Absolutely. So on the next page in your packet, we're showing that like, we're proposing that we just take out that development pressure section of our ranking system. And we're proposing we take it out of the bond ranking system
Right.
and potentially leave it in the existing ag advisory board ranking system.
What are you bringing back to us, to the commission, to show? What are you going to show on that screen?
Whatever,
Is it just the bond?
So, yeah, so what's your presentation gonna
What's your
be?
presentation?
So this is, I think, up for discussion here. And hopefully it can really help this, in what they need to see. So what we thought happened was just some confusion on the next page, the flow chart. You know, we kind of zoomed in on the flow chart. So we thought that one of the things that would be helpful is to zoom out a little bit and show the funding piece, the grant funding piece, and show that it's ahead of the bond, showing that we're leveraging as much funding.
so
as
like
possible.
here, all of this, this color is all what we go through before we get to the bond. So we are exploring all grant options, all funding options, and then our last option is the bond. That's kind of.
So that's the leverage
Yeah.
piece. And then, did you change any language in the double box?
No.
That's the bond, you know. So, but then we had that blue box off to the side that kind of went back over a few things. Did that change at all? Yeah, that anything. So
I don't think so.
basically you won't see the development question anymore. You won't see, it'll just be those criteria at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the slide really that we shared at the board meeting. That was where he was asking a lot of questions.
So I guess the
Is that
question
what-
is, do you want us to show like where we have all this and we don't even have this development pressure question? And either we keep this on as part of the ranking, or we're suggesting as staff, we don't even include that in the ranking itself. It's data we collect to say like, these are the number of grants, the applications we submitted, and this is the amount of funding we leveraged, but it's not necessarily part of the ranking for a project. So we would only really show this. We wouldn't have that in the bond criteria.
Or we could have it, this would have no point value beside it, showing that we are, you know, we're capturing it, but are we assigning points?
So the question you're going to get is they're going to say, okay, on the LCAP, you're showing that you're looking for leveraging.
Yeah.
So the question's going to be to you, how are you ranking it to where you're showing that leveraging is counting on this side too?
Yeah, and that's kind of the tricky part is that because by the time we get to the bond for ag advisory, we've already exhausted all.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not necessarily like we're combining bond and grant funds on a single project.
Mhm.
Like, in my mind, if we have 4 chances to submit a grant application, and the max you can request for each grant is 50%, I'm gonna request 50%, 50%, 50%, 50%, instead of 25% and then matching 25% of the
Yeah.
bond, because I'm not maximizing our funding going in. So I don't know how much we will be finding grant and bond sources on single projects.
For ag,
Unless the cap for the grant, you know, applications is lifted, and then I can see us doing that.
because for LCAP, it's on the criteria because it's a land trust, so we want them to leverage other sources of funding, and we want to make sure we're ranking them higher if they leverage that funding. But for us, it's all based on grants. If we collect them, we're gonna leverage that. If we can't, that's when we get to the bond. So that question doesn't.
But it's, yeah, but it's still, I understand what you mean, like, that's what they wanted, that's what they asked for, that's what they want to see, so I feel like we need to show that.
But the second half of that is, would you fund a project, would a project that only needs 25% funding, would that rank higher than a project that needs 50% funding if that farm wasn't as high quality of a farm? Are you looking for highest quality farmland being protected? Or are we looking for lowest amount of money having to be spent?
So with your ranking, if you don't value the leveraging, so say with what you're saying, say that you're valuing the leveraging at a lower point value, it's one component in it. But your high value farmland should be much higher.
Right?
If that
All this
farmland
other
scores
stuff should-
well,
So you're saying like as a weighted criteria, you could still give it
So we were, I mean,
So rank it with
it would still
something
just be
and
about
then-
10 points of value
Yeah.
in 100 points.
And then you addressed what was presented to you as a,
Yeah.
like, and it still works for what, us valuing our farmland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
it
would it
doesn't
be-
change.
Would
what
it be
we're-
like a 10-point or no point? Like,
Up to
or would
10?
there be a point system within that? It's either, yes, you are bringing other funding to the table, or you're not. So you're either getting funding or you're not. Or would you want to see basic amounts or something like that?
So I've seen it, in looking at other similar programs, like I've seen them do that where the more funding that you're leveraging makes you get. So it'd be like a project that is bringing, only needs 25% of funds would have 8 out of 10 points, whereas one that needs 50% of funds would have 5 out of 10.
Mhm. That makes sense to me. I mean, it's still gonna get to the fact that we want to preserve the highest quality farmland, but if there's a farm that's like, oh, I'm willing to do 50% donation versus a farm who is like whatever other percentage, then you can put some value on that. I mean, does anybody see any issue like through, like, does that still meet our objectives that address that concern?
So the one thing to throw this out there to make sure I'm understanding it, if we take development pressure off of the AAB ranking, add those points to land evaluation, then I think the rest could stay equal. That way, we're prioritizing the prime soils, the best agricultural land at a higher value, which it is for ag advisory. And then still, we're addressing the funding leverage, but giving those farms that have the prime soils a little more advantage as well, because that's what we're striving to protect.
So right now, what we've done is we've taken development pressure out and replaced it with the 10 points around funding leverage. So if you have that question, you don't have any extra points. Does that make sense? And to be able to put into the land leverage.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he's saying.
So you're saying you just took 3 out and replaced it with 4?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to split the difference.
Okay.
And put 5 points more on land evaluation and keep 5 in development.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I think that's ultimately, you're trying to protect.
Yeah,
that
that's ultimately,
above.
that's the
Yeah.
resource we're trying to
That's the
protect is the
priority.
prime soils and the.
So we have a proposal for, well, my initial question is, do you think it should be one question that is on funding leverage and donation value together? Or do you think they need to be 2 questions? One just on donation value and one on leverage funding?
Oh, I think it's one.
I think
That's-
one,
We have
yeah.
we have a proposal for that question that's just one.
Because I mean,
And you
that's,
said valued at 5 points.
when we talk about leveraging, and I think even in the meeting, leveraging is when you grant funds and you're donating, right? All of it's part of the leverage.
Yes, yeah. The 10 to 1, we included landowner
We
donation
did,
in that, so.
yeah.
Do you think they understood when we said up to 50%, that meant the landowner was donating 50% of the value, or should that be highlighted?
So I don't think they understood much.
Yeah, okay. There's some confusion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that, the other just little idea that came to me, don't know if it would be helpful. But if you had like an FAQ slide where maybe you address some of those things in a little more depth and just make them really clear cut.
Yeah, it's very, very straightforward, because honestly, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you come into this meeting and you put all this information up there, right? And then honestly, you know, I love this. Nobody else is,
Yeah.
just make it very basic and address those points.
So part of the confusion on that slide is somewhat intentional in that wanted to show the complexity, but to your point, once you know the complexity, you can just look at it for complexity, but otherwise you look at it as, wait, what is all of this? So,
Mhm.
And I might have missed this, but would it be helpful for the commissioners to walk through a sample project? Would that be helpful to explain? Or is that too much information?
I almost think it's
Too much?
I think
Okay.
really at this point, just address the things that were brought up.
And they're
And
unique.
then be done.
And keep it simple. I think the question was, right, those are the two main things. Let's not get odds with our affordable housing,
Yes.
and let's make, as we are still continuing to leverage. Right. I think from the community perspective, that was where they're coming from, is like, let's make sure we're communicating.
Okay. So the last question we have, okay, just to make sure that we got everything. We're taking 5 points from the site assessment, question, giving that to the land evaluation, and then leaving 5 points for the question of the value, leverage, and donation. Okay, we already have that question ready, so we will have that all done. Okay, and then the last question.
And that way, it doesn't impact you being able to go after grants. You're fine on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the last question we have is the at the end of each flow chart that we've created for Ag Advisory and with LCAB, there is basically you answer these questions to determine if this project is eligible to request easement purchase from the bond, and then there is a box that says you can request up to 50% of the easement purchase or easement value. So our question is that the entity, meaning us, is only able to apply for 50% of the easement purchase from the bond? Or does that mean the entire compensation to the landowner, including, grant funds, bond funds, private funds, we're talking about LCAB, can only be 50% of easement purchase?
So the assumption is at least 50% donation on every bond fund project.
What are your thoughts? I mean, my initial thought is we don't want to limit our partners in the land trust for bringing in other funds from private donations or grant funds, and also for ourselves to have the ability to have, a project that is grant funds and bond funds mixed. But I wanted to see what.
So one question, from the standpoint of LCAB, has that been an issue with the way they put funding together?
I don't think it's been an issue, but I would say, I think typically they try to raise enough funds that they probably get over the 50% of the easement purchase.
They've usually only asked generally for transaction costs too, so we don't know how much they're actually.
So,
And it hasn't been an issue because we have never had a cap to it. So this is, since the bond funds have never been available, there's never been something to request.
Right.
So it could get very, I think we have to have some very clear language here. Otherwise, how are we going to evaluate the request? We have the criteria, but if it meets all of the criteria, what says it's 35, 40, 50? How are we, if we use the language up to, how is that up to?
how do you determine it?
Right, and in the LCAB, it's 25 to 50. So what makes it a 25% project? What makes it a 50% project?
That was partly, I guess, for the leveraging, ranking the leveraging came in. I'll share what was in my mind, and Ariel and I had multiple discussions around this, kind of the difference with LCAB and Ag Advisory. For me, like with LCAB, because they have access to additional funding, right? And so to me, I felt like we should put some kind of cap on that. Otherwise, you could have a few big projects where they're like, well, let's just go and get this. And you want to make sure that they're continuing to leverage. So that had been part of my original thought, right? Like we should. And then of course, then we know from the Ag Advisory standpoint, we only have certain grant funding. We don't have the private donors and all that. And so we were like, well, we need more potential. Like to me, originally, I was really tough. I was like 25% top, something like But, and whereas like for the Ag Advisory, I'm like, it felt like we need to be able to do at least 50%, right? Because if you don't have any grant funding, if you're asking a working farm, you've got to be able to do at least. And it seems like if you look back at past projects, a lot of times up to that 50% was kind of where you saw, where you kind of saw them. So that was my original thoughts, but I'm curious to hear.
And the
whatever.
LCAP is 20, their flow chart says 25 to 50%.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And I mean, one thing to go along with that, as to whether it's 25, 35, 45, 50, maybe that working farm question is your influencer there. And I don't know that that would need to be necessarily in a presentation, but just for if the question were asked, we'd say, in our appraisal process, the board would look at is this a working farm? Is there, what are the other sources of funding? Is it in one of the 4 critical areas or what have you? And, those could be some determinants, just so, these are our discussion points. Maybe they're not necessarily a rock solid determinant.
And the board, the Ag Advisory Board is the ones that are deciding that they want to put forward a 50% request from the commissioners. So
that's a little bit, I guess, to my question. The board needs to have some flexibility, in being able to look at the circumstances and adjust, to make the best use of the funds, which I think is one reason we're here, right?
Yeah. So here's the question. If Ariel and Ebony were able to raise 50% in grant funds, and the landowner needs 75 to be able to do the donation, could this board give or recommend a 25% funding? So is it 50% funding from this board, or is it 50% of the project value? So that's the way we're saying it, up to 50% means this board could recommend up to 50% of it. And the way we've been talking about it, saying, but we're going to go from grant funds before that, wherever possible. But there's not been yet a distinction between, do those count at 50 or do they not? So I think that's one
percentage, or is it the project total?
Some clarity needs to happen around that.
So I'd say originally, what my thoughts have been like funding up to 50% of a project, whether it's the grant funds, any kind of funds, right, coming in, because that's typically in the past, most of the projects in order for us to leverage have been 50% funding, no matter where it's coming from. But this is a very important conversation, and be clear that we all have really thought about it and on the same page, especially when it comes to the working farms.
Yeah, and I think, I'll just throw out here my impression. I think, if we've got a farm that meets a lot of our critical criteria, we're going to have a good potential to have those grant funds and those types of things that are coming in. So if we're, up to 50%, like you said, of all resources, and then you have a donation, that seems like a good general rule. My caveat would be too, if we have like a critical water situation, if there are extenuating circumstances, that we would have the flexibility to go up to 75% of the total. And maybe, I don't want to complicate things too much, but still, I don't want to take away flexibility from, if you've got a working operation, as David can tell you better than your land is your capital, and that's your retirement, that's your, you're paying the nursing home, whatever it winds up having to be. So, some situations, that 50% might not quite fit the needs, and it's a critical resource to protect. So, and that's a lot of verbiage there. I don't know how to put that succinctly, but
If we don't, we'll probably lose some farms.
Right.
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah. So our general proposal was like the wording of the bond will cover up to 50 or can cover up to 50% of the easement value after other funding sources have been explored or exhausted. Like that's kind of.
So does
Was
that
there any
means
problem?
that it could be both, right?
Right.
So that
Was there any problem with that language, Terry?
I don't
Or not to
think
put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, during the meeting?
Right.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't any,
There
it didn't
wasn't.
bring up, but after we went back and looked at the rest, we were like, oh, I want to make sure if they ask, I know how to
Right.
explain it, and I didn't have the clarity.
Yeah.
I'll just throw in another like level to the conversation is currently, we don't have a passed budget yet. But if the commissioners fund easements at 750,000 and we have the bond funds, could you go after that 25 in our budget funds and not use bond funds to go over 50%? So that's another, I mean, this
Yeah.
gets really complicated to think through how all those pots of money would be used. The way we've talked about it is that we would continue to use the commissioner allocated funds for the transaction costs primarily. And then bond funds could be used for easement purchase, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so that's just maybe some wiggle room if that language feels too loose for the.
Well,
Read the language again. I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
Well, and I was gonna say, the other thing is that we want to put something in place that we don't need to change. Because I don't want the person that does an easement this fall to feel like he got the short stick based on the deal we make 5 years from now.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, consistency is important because everybody does talk. And you
Well,
we
it's
have
a matter of public record.
Right.
It's gonna be out there if we do it.
And the program has such a good reputation. We don't want to do anything. We want to ensure that it continues to have that.
You got 40 people in the till, you know that something's being done right, so.
So would you read the language
Yeah.
again? on that?
So the bond can fund up to 50% of the easement value after other funding sources have been explored or exhausted.
Sounds pretty good to me. I can't think of any immediate holes in that. Can anyone else have thoughts? Say it one more time.
The bond can fund up to 50% of the easement value after other funding sources have been explored or exhausted. So that's showing that we're trying to leverage funds, we're trying to put, our grant fund applications out there. But it allows the flexibility of, at the discretion of the board, project to project, you can determine, staff will bring a proposal to the board will decide that percentage and then, advise the commissioners of that value.
Well, what could be a little confusing to me if they fund up to 50% after everything else has been exhausted. Can they not fund up to 50% anyway? Is there a
Yes.
reason for that? I mean, can fund up to 50%. Or who's going to decide how much, what percentage of the fund, and then explore who's going to pay the balance?
I mean, I think at this point, our standard rate of, compensation is around 50%. If they were looking for, that's our standard for the federal government, our state government, both grants, and then that is what we're recommending. It probably will be rare that we would.
So
Like a
it should just
project
be
at
up to
less.
50%.
The only place where it would maybe be less than 50% is if, say, and this is where the nuance is, if a farm received 25% of the value in grant funds, would it only be 25%? Or could the bond still fund 50%? And then this, because they had an extra 25% in the grant funds, could they be compensated at 50%? Or this language could insinuate that we get 50% bond funding, or excuse me, grant funding. We could still give them 50% of the value in bond funding and they could get
As well.
100%.
Okay.
So I think
We don't wanna do
but that's what we need to be careful
We need to say that.
of how we say it.
Yeah, I mean, then it
That's
could
an
be.
attorney, that's an attorney thing.
Yeah.
That's above our pay, that's above our pay.
That's a good point.
The entire
The only
project
thing,
compensation can't be over 75.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna mention. Should we say, there must be a certain percentage of donation and just make that very clear?
And I think that could be the way to say it, Steve, is that the expectation is there is a minimum of 25% or 50, whatever number you want, donation.
I can go
And
with
then,
that.
That would clarify it to the
Yeah.
farmer.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
Looking at it from the farmers, that we would be required to donate 25% of the bag.
At least 25 to 50%.
Yeah.
Well, and of the, we've got a list of 40. All of these people have been informed that 50% is all you're gonna get.
That's really what when we talk to folks.
Yeah.
We put that out pretty clearly.
So, I think that's kind of the expectation that we built into this program is that 50% is all you're gonna get.
We just leave it at that because we're gonna be stepping on other toes from the past donations. So just,
That's a very good observation, Bruce. That we wouldn't want to just sour taste in the mouths of ones that have done it
a lot more
before.
out there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Consistent.
the only ones that ever get more with the federal grants, sometimes you
If
get
you-
more.
Yeah.
right?
That's when we get
But
75.
that's such a small percentage of
and
farmers.
that wouldn't be in
That
this
would-
conversation.
yeah, that wouldn't
anyhow,
affect
because
us
we'd be
anyhow.
Going after bond funds.
Yeah, very true.
And I know that this isn't the purview of this board, but since Ariel and of me manage the LCAP board, would that be the recommendation that you would have for that one too? Is that for land trust side, that it would be a cap or a minimum donation value?
Yeah, of at least 25%. I mean, if they want to claim any IRS tax deduction, they have to donate 25%. That's like,
Yeah.
And I guess really, if you look at their projects, I mean, that's where that leveraging comes in, right on that check. But now, in all reality, if a land trust is wanting to pay somebody, if they have some high value and they want to go after it and pay private funding.
Yeah.
And they're
There
just,
you
you don't
go.
want to
That
stop.
Yeah.
wouldn't
they're
be,
not stopping
Yeah.
them.
it wouldn't be
And
a bond fund, a bond project then.
we'll say that they were just asking for 25% of it. I don't know, like, say they asked for 25% to help with this project and they're gonna pay the rest of it.
And I mean, that's out of our purview. I mean, we're still following our rules. If they're able to get more through a private source, I don't see why that would be our concern.
I would say the only reason it would be a concern is if, and I think this is actually a commissioner question, if the commissioners felt that there should be a requirement of some level of land donation, that maybe they would say, well, then you go out and raise 75%, that's on you, but we're not gonna give you that final 25%. But it's as you're putting together your funding package, you don't always have all of your
All
funding
those
before you
pieces.
come to
Yeah,
one of these
exactly.
boards. And so we wouldn't know that. And so it'd have to be
And if that,
good faith.
yeah, and if that 25% is just kind of a bedrock number, then, we're assured if it's a project that qualifies for our help, it would have that minimum, level of donation anyway. So, we're kind of, like David said, we're kind of getting into legal, territory, I
Yeah.
guess, a
And
little
if you
bit
give
here,
us
but.
what the intent is, we
Yeah.
can work with, with county legal or with Lynn to make sure we get the verbiage correct so that it works. But we just want to make sure we're representing what it is that you want to see.
I like Steve's idea of the minimum 25% donation.
That works. And somehow getting in there though, but we encourage up to 50% because it's typically been that amount. So I don't want to set it to where then everybody's like, oh, we only have to do 25% now.
I think that maybe a requirement of
Yes.
25 to 50%.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
That gives it a slide.
Okay.
Just with the knowledge that 50%'s been our general practice.
And so then, as you determine that, do you want that as part of the ranking? Do you want to give points that would make those people that are only asking for 50% more attractive than somebody that needs 75% or needs an extra 25 after they've gotten their grant funding? Or is that just kind of, do you just, and I don't know if this is allowed, so I'll just throw it up. Is it more of a case by case basis where we discuss and we make a recommendation based on everything that we know? This is a working farm, great prime soils, and it's a farm we really don't want to lose. It fits a puzzle piece in proximity, it gives us contiguous land or whatever. I think those are the things that when you just see it on a ranking criteria, it's hard to understand and it's still getting highest quality projects.
And I feel like that is an example of why the board's here. If we have, those discussions among ourselves within these broad guidelines, that unicorn farm that might come up, once every 25 years, we'd have some leeway to discuss amongst ourselves and, see what we can do within all the avenues open to us. And I'd imagine some farms would have LCAP value as well as ag value. So, there's, a few of those big ones still left that have, mountain acreage, forested, they have some bottom land or, creekside soils. I mean, they're not a lot of them. There's still a few out there.
I think it's a good point. I mean, if all it was just running it through a point system, we
And
wouldn't need your
we wouldn't-
recommendation. We'd just give you the points and
We could just had our breakfast and
I
went
think
on.
that's a really, a really good, there's value to the board, right?
Yeah.
It's always good at putting a fine point on it.
That's why he's our chair. Okay, so I feel like we have our clarity in the questions that we were asking. Do you guys have any other questions around this?
So just so I'm straight, so I want to make sure. So we're taking out the development pressure piece.
Correct, that's going away completely.
Okay, and then we are going to add in the leveraging piece,
Yes.
whether that's grants, donations, whatever, it's leveraging.
And it'll be
Okay.
one question that is combined, leveraged and landowner donation combined. All in one
Okay,
question.
so there we go.
And that'll be 5 points.
Okay, and then you're adding 5 points up here where Steve said to the
To the land
the land
evaluation.
evaluation. Okay. And that's it.
Yeah.
And then putting the minimum
Yep.
of 25 up to 50%
Okay.
required donation.
Okay,
Okay, so basically, next steps that we, hopefully you guys will vote today to approve that amended bond ranking criteria. And then we'll bring it to the Energy and Environment Subcommittee on Friday. Because there are 3 commissioners that are focused on the environment issues there, so we'll be able to kind of review it.
oh, that's a good idea. You can get your questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to review it there and then make comments, any, changes or whatever. And then we'll bring it back to the commissioners on May 2nd. So that is pretty much our next step.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the bond requirements? Seeing none, do I hear a motion to adopt the bond requirements as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and properly seconded to adopt the bond requirements as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes have it, amendments pass. Yeah.
And then Jill, from your perspective, if once this passes the commissioners on May 2nd, we can start.
We can move forward with
Recommend-
evaluating projects using this criteria, selecting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
All right.
exciting.
Not far away, great.
That's the last step.
Last up, yeah, so that's exciting, very close.
So this will be the first use of the bonds, the first program that's actually ready to go.
Yeah.
All right, way to go.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, that's all for the board criteria discussion.
All right, any reports from board members?
thank you for our breakfast. Yes, it's wonderful to get to be back together doing this again. Are we going to continue doing this?
Yeah, we'd love to, as long as the commissioners continue to fund it. No, I'm just joking. No, yes, we would.
We do need fun.
Yeah, we love doing this. I know we had a great turnout today.
It was good.
And it
We
was
had two other
at least
commissioners show
100
up.
people, yeah.
I am gonna miss the banquet because my youngest son is graduating with his master's at UNC Wilmington, so we're going there to watch him walk, and so
Yeah.
I'll get to attend that. I hate that.
Oh, it's okay. We'll have another one next year. hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully no more pandemics. We'll have-
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully everybody else is getting to come.
Yes, yeah, we've got,
Okay.
we're collecting RSVPs
Oh,
for the
good.
conservation dinner, and we've got a lot of people coming, so.
Oh,
When
good.
when is that again?
Lots to recognize.
May,
There
uh,
hasn't been one.
We ordered 38 plaques. We had to collect donations from LCAB board members and other businesses to be able to afford them, because we had budget for that, you know?
Okay.
Usually in the past, it's like 5
5 in a
cents
year or
a year or
something.
so. So we have 38, because the last time we did the dinner was 2017.
Okay.
So we had to catch up.
All right, I guess if there are no other board updates, applications for VAD and EVAD with Avi.
Yes, so we have 3 applications, 2 are renewals. I think I mentioned we've been trying to get all the terms that expired renewed this time around. So we have 2 renewals. And then there's 1 new application by Denny Weaverville, 27 acres. And it's a new, that parcel used to be in bud owner, so it's kind of a renewal.
And he also just recently applied for an easement too. So we've added him onto our,
Why, Denny?
Yep.
Oh, really?
Do you know him?
I think I know his son.
oh yeah, so he's directly across Barnersville Highway from Joe Ramsey's property.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it's
I don't know for sure. I'll find it, but if it's who I'm thinking of, his son's headed our North Carolina Department of Technology. I speak with him regularly about broadband.
he moved here in about 2020.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Because, when I was doing a post on broadband, the mom reached out to me via Instagram. She's like, that's my son.
Cool.
So I'm just guessing by the last name. That's probably Anyway, Lester, the one, I'm not familiar with that one. Do you know where that is?
I don't know where that one is.
Do you know
Where's that
North
farm?
River Farm.
What?
North
like
River Farm
North
is
River
the
Farms
name
or
of the
something.
farm.
Yeah.
But that,
Yeah, Jason was here this morning.
I saw
Oh,
him,
it,
but I didn't know that's who he was. I
Is
mean,
he
I didn't
oh,
know
he goes by
that.
Jason.
Big guy.
Big
yeah.
guy, yeah.
is he
okay.
leasing Lynn Brown's company?
Yeah, because in his primary operation, Mills
It's in
River.
Mills River,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
He
was-
just has, it's just, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good to know. I know his sister's in Lester and her husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Maybe that's the property,
maybe that's part of it.
because it was his sister that applied, that sent the application. in.
Yeah, she's a Revis, I think, by marriage.
That's right. Yeah, he was raised out there.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It was right there next to Turkey Creek Church, I think.
I believe you're
Go
right.
over to here, around the curve at Turkey Creek. He's
Yeah.
down there in the hole somewhere.
Okay, I know about where you mean.
Anyway.
Good, let's get him in bed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right.
That's
okay, good.
Jason is
We
one
got
of
him
my
placed.
farm credit success stories.
Oh.
I made him his first loan,
And now look at it.
$3,000 to buy a direct seed tomato plant.
Oh, man.
Like 1990.
How about that?
That's great.
Well, he has been a success story. Good gracious.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. All right, well, that being said, do I hear a motion to approve the applications for VAD and EVAD?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Moved and properly seconded to approve the new applications for VAD and EVAD. All in favor? All opposed? Ayes have it, applications are approved. And next we have the farmland preservation report with Ariel.
No, I think it's the-
Awesome. Well, we already mentioned the conservation family dinner. We've been doing lots of work to prep for that. Bunch of flax orders, dealing with catering and event center rental and all that. So that's going, just under a month away. Then Avni and I have been working on putting together some general ideas of the projects that we'll put forward for grant funding for fall, as well as for bond funding once the criteria is all approved by the commissioners. The rest is pretty much what we mentioned, having gone to the commissioner meeting back in March and receiving requests for changes. We have been working with Jill and the recreations department on helping put together the passive recreation lands criteria and process, and that's going very smoothly. We are also working with LCAB and all the land trusts that request from LCAB to make sure that we commit all of fiscal 23's funding to projects by June. So we have a handful of LCAB visits that are coming up that we'll be going out with the land trust reps. And then let's see. Our hope is that at the May 2nd meeting, when we're there to present the criteria, we will also bring a budget amendment to the commissioners for the 2 donation easements that you approved last month. So that would be the Worthen and Co property and the Soden property. So that's the plan. Probably have a couple other projects as well maybe just one coming from LCAB on the same budget amendment. So
Will that max out the allocation?
no, we still have more to come.
But from this group?
From us, yes, that's
max.
max. Yeah, we'll have allocated all of our, and actually we're closing 7 old projects that have just $1,000 or so here and there, and consolidating all of those funds into these projects. So we're even using more funds by cleaning up old projects and using that funds on new projects.
And are
So
we on schedule with LCAB?
we are on schedule with LCAB.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. The plan is for that to happen. They have, I think, Southern App is requesting a project. They requested one last month. I think they're presenting one in May, as well as Conserving Carolina is presenting one in May. So that we should be on schedule then. Okay. General easement project updates. We're still in the survey process with the Larson and Wesley easement. Garrett Cove is tentatively is postponed until the summer just because Southern App is working on their plan around Garrett Cove. We're still in the same situation with the Teague property, which is the community farm easement. We're ready to close, but Southern App is still dealing with the boundary dispute with their neighbor. So we're pretty much just waiting until they've solved that, and then we'll be able to close on the easement. So the Sluder and Ramsey easements are also both moving along. They're both, Sluder's just state funding, so that's moving quick, a bit more quick. That's the surveys under review as well as the deed. Ramsey, I mentioned last meeting, we had to do an environmental assessment. And then in that environmental assessment, we found that there were some buried oil barrels on the property. So we started the phase 2 environmental assessment. And so far that's going beautifully. Yes.
I had an earful this morning.
Oh, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. I daily get phone calls. Daily.
Thank you for your good work.
So that is, we have survey approved, deed has been approved. We are moving along. Avni's doing the baseline right now, and hopefully we'll get the phase 2 environmental assessment report over the next 2 days or so. And our hope is that there were no significant findings. We went out and drilled and we did not drill. The consultant drilled and tested soil and groundwater around the buried oil tanks, and surprisingly so far has not found anything significant, which is shocking, he says, in his experience. So that's great.
Okay.
this is a requirement to be able to keep our grant funding. If, if we didn't do a phase 2, we could have lost both our grants for the project. So the phase 2 really allows us to keep the funding, and then as it comes back clean, we'll be able to just keep moving along. So.
And we learned something through
Mhm.
through this, and that is that there is great value in having someone do the phase 1
Yes.
assessment. So we're recommending that we continue to hire that.
Yes.
Correct.
In the past, we have done the environmental assessments all in-house. We did them. And I mean, standardly, it's a, 7-page document with a bunch of questions that you ask the landowner and you walk out, it can be simple, but there can also be some liability around that if, say, the landowner doesn't disclose something, or, something in the future comes up and staff did that environmental assessment. So what we're finding and what is being recommended by both grants is to hire that out to a consultant.
So on grant projects, we need to do that, but if it's other projects, we don't necessarily need to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of, it might be good to do it on all projects, but I think especially the grant projects.
Gives us,
Like what the cost is.
Yeah, so the phase 1 environmental assessment is about $2,000.
Okay. So we have
And
our
then,
transaction.
if you have a finding in the phase 1, which is not common, usually phase 1s come out pretty clean. But if you have a finding, then you have to hire somebody to do the phase 2, and that can be more like $7,000. So it may be worth it to do it for all projects, to just do a phase 1. And then if something happens, where you need a phase 2, we would have to go back and ask for funding to do a phase 2. Yeah, that's kind of what we're learning. We're also learning.
Why would we get into doing that on donation projects? So, I get it on the grant. Why would you want to automatically do it on the donation and the other projects?
So for phase 1, it might be something just to include in the baseline report, really, if something came up in the future to show, like, we did a phase 1 and say maybe they did find some small things. The phase 2, we don't have to do a phase 2 for donation, especially if, like, the board, if they do find something and the board thinks it's not necessarily like something big that needs to be remediated or tested, then we don't have to do phase 2.
And we could do
A dead cow and a buried oil barrel.
yeah.
But it need to put some liability on that landowner to assume some responsibility that say, because something could have happened before they got the land, but if they've been there the lifetime, they need to assume some liability that takes some responsibility for
exactly
what's there, what's buried.
And so we're learning a lot to know, like, what questions we need to ask earlier in the process too. We need to have these questions in our initial site visit, form and those, and the landowner questionnaire, those kinds of things, so that they're disclosing this information up front. And we're also we've been working with county legal to revise our letter of intent that we use for all of our projects before we spend any county money. And county legal's putting this language in the letter of intent, like, if you don't disclose these kinds of things before we start the project, on you, we're, that
We
type
have
of
some
thing.
stuff on the questionnaire, but maybe it's like reiterating it and having it in the letter of intent. It's a little bit more formal and it's a signed document. So maybe that's something that we talk about.
Reduces the board's
Yeah.
liability.
Exactly, and it kind of works on 2 levels. Number 1, a landowner might honestly not know,
Oh, yeah.
especially if they've
Yeah.
newly purchased,
Yeah.
and so we can ask those questions.
Even if they've
and they don't
inherited it.
know.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
They're not
There's
gonna
the
know.
second one where somebody might be afraid to disclose because then they won't be eligible for an easement. And when they are afraid to disclose, that's where we incur potentially greater cost. If we know something up front, we would design something to take that into account. But if we find it out halfway through the process and we have to go back 3 steps, resurvey or whatever, what is the landowner's then responsibility and what would be covered by the county or through the transaction cost? What would be included in transaction costs? And so the more easements we do, the greater the likelihood that things like this will pop up. It isn't currently an issue, but working with county legal just to figure out how much can we put back on the landowner and how do we do it so that we have a leg to stand on to put it back on the.
Is the landowner making, the environmental people, are they in charge of him moving those tanks out of there?
So the way that works is, this is our first time with one of these, but what I've learned is that first they leave the tanks where they are and they test the soil around it and they take a groundwater sample at each tank. And should the soil and the groundwater sample come out clean, they don't have, and that the tank is empty and can be closed off, they don't have to remove it. And so if the tank is filling with water because there's a leak in it or whatever, they would recommend if it's leaking, then you can remove it. So like an example of this property, there's 5 buried oil tanks. Only one is leaking and we haven't so far found any significant soil samples that show contamination and the groundwater samples have all come out clear. So probably his recommendation is to remove that one and the rest can stay.
And one thing, just when we're thinking about anything around the program, because I had a conversation when I first came in this morning, not with that gentleman, someone else, was talking about, asking about the intent of this program. And I said, it is so that specifically focused on farmland, right, and keeping farming within Buncombe County. And so I do just always think that's a really important thing for us to always keep in mind too, because some feel that that's not always the focus with some programs, right? And I would say I'm proud that that has been the focus of this program. And I feel like this program has done a really good job through the years of making sure that we work with farmers and we don't make it so overly complicated that we aren't able to continue to do this really important good work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we want to keep it farmer friendly.
Yes.
Inviting.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So we are Jasperwood, 4 Jasperwood easements are all, the survey's all in review. Splendor Valley easement, we are ready to close. We're just waiting for the final approval of the subordination agreement from the lender. Same exact situation for the Clark easement. We're pretty much ready to close. We just need to have the subordination agreement signed. And then we did close the burner easement on the 24th of March, which is a pretty picture.
Yeah.
Everybody's so happy that it's done. Yeah, so yeah, we'll hopefully have a couple more easement closings this spring. And yeah, all's going good. Oh yes, so I think the last meeting, we kind of briefly mentioned wanting to figure out if we needed clarification between the Soil and Water Board and the Ag Advisory Board and what powers do each have. So basically, all of our easements are technically held by the Buncombe County Soil and Water Conservation District because soil and water districts are an eligible entity to hold easements. So far, we've all been working well together and it's been going, fine and no problems with the Ag Advisory Board being the advisory board acting on behalf of the Soil and Water District. So, but we just wanted to make sure that we're basically following the rules. And if we need any clarification or any, update in our process, then we would have it. So we talked to county legal, talked to Michael Frew just to ask him some questions. And his recommendation is that right before we bring a project, like last month, we brought the Worthen and the Soden projects to Ag Advisory Board. The Soil and Water Board meets the week before. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring those 2 projects, whatever projects we're bringing to Ag Advisory, the week before we'll bring them to Soil and Water. They'll approve them and basically give their blessing to those projects. And then we'll continue with the same approval process.
But what if
that we have?
We actually are the ones that
You're
approve.
still, yes.
You still
You
will.
still are the approvers, but our concern is, okay, down the road, Jimmy Joe's project was approved by Ag Advisory Board, but the Soil and Water District didn't really see the project in its in that process, and they end up as the holders of the easement.
So I'm just asking, why wouldn't you wait till after it's approved at this board? And then you let them know which projects have been approved? Why would you funnel all
I
projects?
guess it could go either way.
We
What I
just
was
need
just
the
gonna
approval
say
of
is,
the soil and
you
water.
would still, even if Soil and Water Board approved it, you would still have the ability to deny it.
Yes.
It's just we think these are good projects to bring forward. And it's really, it's just to raise their awareness so that they know the projects and,
I think it was also, this is really small, but Soil and Water is the week before.
yeah, so
This
it just
one,
was a timing.
It was also just like timing, because we'd wait, if the board approved it, we'd wait for the next month and then take another month to
It would
take to
prolong
Board
the
of
process.
To take it to the commissioners.
Commissioners. But, I mean, if the board wants to see it first.
If you would
Well,
rather.
do you have to take it to the, I mean, if it's just so they know, you don't have to wait on that before you take it to the commissioners.
What if
True.
they say no and we say yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it
I
really-
guess that's
Yeah.
that would be the
I would
only
think,
sticky point.
say they
Yeah.
say no, and they have a valid point of concern, we could just share it
With
with you guys, we would talk about it. I mean, but rather than you approving it, we could bring it to Soil and Water, they have a concern, we'd then have to come back to Ag Advisory, do the whole process again. I don't know, we're just thinking timeline and efficiency, but,
I really feel like this is the board that decides, so they need to decide, and then you just share it, what they,
I think the piece is, if the Soil and Water Board holds the easement, they're responsible should anything go wrong in the future.
Yeah.
They're the ones that technically have to
defend the easement.
defend the easement. And we have county funds to support that, but, so it was more, it's just more of an awareness, piece, and they have never expressed any concern over anything. It was more just, realizing that as they hold the easement, they should know about
Yeah.
the projects. So I kind of say like vote to bring them, but it's
I mean,
yeah.
really what they need, so the other piece is signature authority. So in all of our documents right now, all of our legal documents at the easement closing, in the past, the district director signs those documents at the closing, and then the landowner signs, and then they're both notarized. So that's the baseline document and the easement deed. And so Jennifer has signed on behalf, and Gary used to sign on behalf of the district, but there's nothing in any of the governing documents around our easement program or around the district that provides the district director that authority. So that was the second piece. Basically, they're saying, okay, we see that these are the projects that you're, wanting to move forward with, and we give Jennifer the authority to sign.
And, every time I sign one, I laugh a little bit on who am I to sign, a document, right? And since it's the board ultimately who holds the easement, should it be the board chair that
Could be the
signs it?
board chair.
But out of, honestly, out of convenience, it's a much easier, I'm there, I can sign them. So if they give me the authority, if they say, yes, we think this is a good project, go ahead and move forward with it, then it's just more comfortable knowing that they approve, yeah.
Would that be anything, I mean, do we have a formal like MOU or MOA with?
Well, that's what we were
That's kind of what we were
yeah.
asking
Okay,
for,
yeah.
and Free was saying that we don't have that, and we don't really need that as long as we do this process.
Okay,
Of-
so this
of-
is in lieu of
Yeah.
like a formal.
We could
Yeah, he
do
was
an MOA.
really not interested in the MOA so much. He was just saying, you don't need that. You don't need that.
Yeah.
Could we? I suppose.
Sure, we could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, what he was saying was he didn't recommend doing an MOU or an MOA because you can't really bind future boards.
That's what, yeah.
So you can that, which.
We could do an annual MOA.
Yes.
That
In
would
the
say-
January of every, year,
Yeah.
you could, the Soil and Water District could say, we vote for, this year to make the Ag Advisory Board our,
There
Same
you
reason
go.
they couldn't give me
Right, yeah.
signatory for
Yeah.
everything.
And then we
They
don't have to do
vote
this
it.
whole other stuff. You just have
And that
that.
would save us a step.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that- it
And,
sounded like
and that
Amy was
makes
okay
it it
with
still
that.
clear that this is the decision-making body
Yes.
around
Yeah.
the easements, because I could see some,
Yeah.
As Ed Bullitt would say, we are authorized by state statute to make that decision.
yes.
Nobody can do it but us.
I know.
And,
Yeah.
and just to be
is
very
that?
clear, Stormwater Board isn't.
They're not
asking- They're not
asking for this.
requesting
We're just making sure we're
anything.
following.
It's
the
just
guidelines.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, and yeah, and just making sure that everything, as the bond is more public and, you know, there's more light
There's more
shown on
scrutiny.
all
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
work that we're doing. We just want to make sure that everything is buttoned up. It was not because there has been any problems whatsoever.
Okay, that's great.
So we'll go back and talk to Michael and then bring that
And we'll
back.
make sure
If we
that
can do
that's
the
good,
MO
and then,
MOU.
yeah. And that would just be soil and water adopting that at the beginning of every year as a policy, right? And then-
Yeah, I believe- but both parties
will
would
need to
agree,
agree to
yeah.
Okay.
They enter into an agreement.
All right, anything else on farmland preservation?
That's all we got.
All right, any announcements or other discussion from members of the board? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? We are adjourned.